In this video, we'll be covering art making techniques with different materials. So let's look at colored pencil in an illustration. When you have an illustration layout, it's good to have a resource photo if you have one that you're going by. With getting my colored pencils, I'm going to start doing some skin tone. Now, whenever I use colored pencil, I always want to work from lighter to more intense, or light to dark with my colors. So looking at the skin, I'm going to give him a base of kind of a light caramel color. And then I'm going to start taking a look at where his flesh tone is a little warmer and darker. That's what I'm doing right now as I compare it to the photo. I'm not worried about it being perfectly exact like the photo in terms of the colors, but I am paying attention to the shadows and the highlights. So now you're going to see I kind of scribble with the material, but they're light scribbles. And as I layer with the same color pencil, I get deeper results. I'm going to do the same thing on the hair. Kind of deserves kind of a caramel color too. So I'm going to work that over everywhere. And again, add sketch lines with pencil whenever I need to help guide me in my color pencil process. So even though an area is going to receive a darker brown, I want to put light brown everywhere. Now I'm going to take a pink, and that's going to start to warm up the flesh tone a little bit. So I'm pretty much going over everywhere I went with brown on the skin to help create a warmer, soft brown. I'm using very light pressure with the colored pencil. The next step is I'm going to step up to a slightly warm dark brown, and I'm going to use light pressure and then constantly add layers or build it up with a little bit more pressure. This darker brown is going to help achieve more contrast on the face, which will mean more shadows and highlights will be easily seen, and I'll be able to create more detail on my character. This would be the same if I was doing the drawing of a tree, or a drawing of a building, or a drawing of a person. I'm building up from light to dark. I'm going to use that same brown to add some darker values of brown in the hair as well. So as you look at the photograph, take a look at why and where I'm putting the darker versions of color. That's where we have contrast. Some people might come really dark right off the bat into a drawing, and there's nothing wrong with that, but you really have to control the darks, because you are dealing with the white of the paper being your lightest and brightest value. So it's easy to build up your darks instead of starting too dark too early. Because this way I can leave any light areas a little bit less developed than others. I'm going to bring in a little coat of red for his bandana, and then do a little bit more texture and lines to build up the intensity of the red where it's needed. I'm going to do a little more detail work, start doing some detail work, and start bringing in his mustache and facial hair. So here I'll start with a medium brown, start to get the hair textures with little flicks. After I bring the brown in and I'm happy with the movement, I'll step up with a little black now to go in some really dark areas where I feel the black definitely needs to work. And this will really start capturing a lot of that intense detail now with these new colors I'm bringing in, these darker values. Brought in a little bit of red to make the lips a little bit brighter, and now I'm bringing the black over the brown to intensify. Using some deeper browns and blacks in the hair to make that a little bit more dark in areas, and that allows the lighter areas to stand out as well. We call that contrast in art. If you want something to look darker, it needs to be built up, and it also allows lighter areas to look brighter when other areas look darker. And I'll just continue building up color and layering throughout the process. The only last step that is really important to notice, if you want to get some smoother texture with your colored pencil after layering, one smart move will be to add white colored pencil over some of your areas you wish blended a little bit more. It allows the color pencil to smudge and blend a little bit easier. I'll be doing that pretty soon. So now I'm kind of pushing that in. What it does is it kind of gives it more of a painted look. The wax in the color pencil smushes the colors together and fuses them in a way that gets rid of some of the white of the paper where you don't want to see it. And it creates a nice blend. Not needed everywhere, but needed where you feel it's important. It's a good skill to pick up on and try out. Just a rule of thought is if you're trying to darken a warm color, try to use a cool color. So that means if I'm trying to darken red, try to use blues, purples, or greens to create really dark values of red. And if you're trying to darken a warm color, which is like a red, orange, or yellow, try to use cool colors. And then the opposite would be if I'm trying to darken a cool color, try to use warm colors. We're now going to move on to charcoal pencil. So this is going to be a black and white drawing, and I'm going to use some erasers and a white and black charcoal pencil and the blending tool. So the first thing I'm going to do, this is how I approach it. As an area needs a lot of grays in it, I'm actually going to place a layer of white chalk down everywhere first. That's going to create a nice area for my blending to build up. So now I'm going to add a little bit more detail from the photograph that wasn't existing in my sketch with the black charcoal pencil. At this point, I can start adding some of my soft tones in. I'm using very light pressure with the charcoal pencil, basically lightly sketching in some dark tones like I did with the color pencil. By varying pressure and movement, I can add darker values. And this is basically sculpting. Again, I'm just trying to read in where it's darkest. If you take a look at the photograph, you'll see why I'm putting the darks and where I'm putting them, because I'm trying to build up the darks to allow the highlights to stand out. So I'm just mapping that out right now. Similar way would be done with ink or color pencil. I'm now going to use a blending tool, which is a wrapped up piece of paper, and when you use it, it works a little better than your finger in tight areas. And because I already had white down on the paper, it smudges the white and black together and you get grays. You can kind of manipulate and push the material where you want. In the early stages, you have soft kind of abstract blends, and as you build up and layer, you get deeper and deeper value changes and more details. This is wonderful for helping to like shape the movement of shadow, especially on a face or something organic, or anything that needs to be shaded on a small scale. He doesn't have facial hair yet. The facial hair comes in after. Always make sure you have a sharp point on a pencil when you have to do tight details. And that's what I'm going to do now. I'm going to illustrate my tighter details. Tighter details include darker shadows, bringing in like the facial hair, small textures that would have been in the way if you tried to do them early in the drawing. And details, of course, always bring out the best in the drawing in the end. But the important thing is layering. Layering your work is a super important sense of skill and patience that you need to have. If you try to do everything in one shot, it's pretty much impossible to get the depth and quality you want in your work. I'm now taking white chalk pencil and I'm building it into the bright areas to help accentuate highlights. I'm using my finger and blending tool to soften textures and blend and round edges that need to be blended. It's not always necessary. I'm not looking for a perfect reproduction. Using the picture of Captain Jack Sparrow as inspiration for this technique. And I'll just keep doing a little bit of the same as I go throughout the illustration. Feel free to leave raw or texture unblended whenever you want. It's just an additional blending method with the blending tool. You don't always need to use it or ever need to use it for that matter. Throughout the rest of the charcoal illustration, I'll just be modifying my highlights and values and textures by adding white and black charcoal. Enjoy! The last technique I'm going to show you is with ink pen. I'm going to use a thick and a thin Sharpie. If you vary the pressure, you can get thinner lines or thicker lines if you go slower or faster with the pen. There are a lot of ways to do ink drawing. I'm going to show you one way where it involves outlining and then also doing shading with it. So here I'm going to put in all my details in pencil first that I really want to see. That way when I'm done, if I still have some pencil lines laying around, I can just simply erase them, and all I leave is the ink behind. So I'm going to do some major outlines that I think are important. If you're unsure if an area should be outlined, don't outline it right away. Outline it at the end if you feel like it needs to stand out. For example, my eyes, I'm going to make sure I outline the upper eyelids, but I'm not quite sure how much I really need to do of the lower eyelids. Maybe just a touch, but not fully outlined. I'm using something called hatch lines. This is like a one direction line. I can manage it in pencil first if I like how it details the face. Hatching is very good, but in the lighter areas, you just want to use a little less than more. It helps develop form and space pretty well, but you can't overdo it if you do a little too much. Just going to get the facial hair in now, just little lines. Again, try it in pencil first so you like it, and you can always add ink, build up, add more, and add more if you feel like you need more. Ink is definitely the most unforgiving of the materials I've shown you today, because once you put a line down, it's hard to hide it. We do have white paint pens that can hide major mistakes, but for the most part, it's more of a permanent line that you put in, and sometimes you have to live with a line that you aren't quite happy with, or adjust it as needed. The closer the lines are together, even where I'm like scribbling here, the darker an area appears. You don't have to fully fill with an ink pen for it to be jet black. You can put a lot of scribbling or lines close together to create a dark, a medium gray, or a light gray, and then just don't put ink anywhere if you want to keep an area super light and bright, like I'm doing. Just follow along. I'm going to be repeating the same process of building more line, adding more texture throughout. You can be more graphic and less detailed than I am. This is just an example of how to do line and texture. In this last portion, I'll be finishing up the ink drawing, and then I'm going to be adding some effects with some color using color pencil. So stick around if you want to see how this works out, but I hope you enjoyed the presentation, and happy art making.